What advice would you give to an indie act, let's say, that's looking to get some merch and just doesn't have any experience?
I would say keep it simple. I think that the biggest risk, especially from a profitability standpoint, would be ordering too many products and ordering too few of too many products. So having 25 units of 17 different products is it's not the most cost-effective way to go about it. So back to my point earlier, I always advise our artists to try to keep it simple. Small, condensed product line. And I would say that making sure that the merch represents your artistic brand and your vision, that's crucial. And partnering with a company that can understand that and be able to deliver on that for you is crucial.
Seamus Menihane is the CEO of Armada, a merch company that's a lot more than just a screen printer. His company works as a true brand partner to artists, creators, and companies, helping them build compelling merch campaigns that actually connect with their audiences. Armada is the result of a recent merger between Seamus's Downright Merch and Overcast Merch and can now rival major label merch operations in both size and scope. Seamus is a former musician who's built the company with artists in mind, running it with a deep respect for the creative process and head-down mentality. During the interview, we talked about best-selling merch trends, profit margins and price strategies, direct-to-consumer sales, merch advice for indie artists, and much more. I spoke with Seamus from his office outside of Boston. When people think of a merch provider, they usually think of some company that's only going to do the printing. But in fact, you offer a lot more than that, right?
Yes, we do the printing for a lot of our clients, and that is part of a service that we offer. But beyond just the production and the manufacturing, we do a lot more than that.
Like what?
So we do a lot of the branding. We do our main, our core business is the e-commerce management and the fulfillment. So we really lead first with the direct-to-consumer side of the business and running the artists' Shopify stores and making sure that they have a great brand and D2C e-commerce component to their merch business.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot actually, and that's usually a component that there'd be a different vendor that would be supplying that.
Historically, yeah, and part of the service that we offer is we try to deliver not only just the brand guiding, so making sure that we're helping with the creative and the artistic direction, but also coming in and helping with the actual infrastructure so that we can send out the product for our customers is really part of the service package that we offer artists.
One of the things that I always thought was that most artists, before they even committed to doing any kind of merch, they would already have the graphics together. But apparently that's not the case, right?
No, it's not. I mean, there are some artists that have a creative director that maybe they've been working with for years, or a graphic artist that is maybe a friend or somebody that's in their circle that will take care of the creative designs and lead up the art aspect of their brand. But more times than not, we're actually helping with doing the designs and getting the product spread together and presenting it to the artist so that we make it really easy for them. So we can proactively put designs in front of them and they can look through all the options that we deliver. That way they don't have to worry about going and finding, a graphic designer and having to source their own designs. We try to get ahead of that aspect for them.
Now, let's talk about your background for a second, because you weren't always in this end of the business. You were a working musician.
I was a drummer for many years. I was a touring drummer. So before I got into, the industry side of it and really getting interested in what other opportunities there are outside of just playing and performing, I was a touring drummer for years. So that's kind of how I cut my teeth.
And what brought you to this end of the business?
I was always interested in doing something on the industry side. And I thought early on that maybe that would be management or working at a record label, or maybe something that was a little more, I don't want to say traditional, but maybe a little bit more of a clearer path. I would go on tour and come back and I would work at a screen printing shop. So that was my gig when I was at home. I was, cleaning screens and kind of doing a lot of the grunt work at the screen printing shop. So I always had an interest on the merchandise side of it. And I think that kind of the two concepts of really being interested on the production, the screen printing side, and getting started with that, and the blend of my interest in music and the music industry, merchandise and brand management seemed like a really good fit, and it seemed like kind of an open lane at that time too, where there wasn't that many options.
Did that start with your band first? So was that your first client?
Yeah, easy client to score, right? Yeah, so that was one of the first clients that we had was my band, and I played in a bunch of different acts back then, like some metal bands, some pop bands, like all over the place. So we were doing a lot of the merchandise for the bands that I was playing with at that time.
That's one part of it, though. Breaking out and actually doing it for a living is something completely different. So how did you make that transition?
I got sick of touring. That was a big aspect of really wanting to commit to the business and really wanting to press forward with it. Was I was just burnt out from being on the road, and I'd done it for so many years, and I loved it, and I had a ton of fun, especially like early on. I really enjoyed it, but I just got tired of touring, and I really wanted to pursue something on the industry side. So that was really the the starting point. I could feel myself kind of being like, maybe the touring and the road isn't for me anymore. But there were a few years where I was kind of juggling both, and that had, its own set of challenges with being on the road and still trying to run a business. And it just kind of came to a point where it was like, well, really need to commit to this as kind of as the future, I feel like.
Yeah, I went through the same thing where I was on the road all the time, and finally it got very old. There was one particular day, I remember one tour that I was doing, and it just hit me one night on stage. It's like, no, I don't think I want to do this anymore.
What was your background?
I was a guitar player at this point. I was the musical director for a famous English guitar player.
Okay.
I won't go any farther than that. Again, it wasn't a great tour. And then it was just like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And, the funny part was it was one of the best days of my life when I actually determined that, because it's as
liberating.
A musician. Yeah. As a musician, there's so much of your personality that's incorporated into being a musician. And you feel like you have to justify that. And when that's gone, it's like, oh, I can
liberating.
be me. Yeah.
There's I feel like a feeling of almost feeling institutionalized to touring too, where if that's the only thing that you've done for years and years, it's that constant feeling of inertia, right? And being on the road and off the road, coming home for 6 weeks, then going back on tour for 6 weeks. And you get in that cycle, and it's really difficult to take your mind out of it and think about living, any other way that isn't in that sort of pattern. So and especially if you do it for years and years, I was on the road, which isn't a real long time, but almost 8 years I was going pretty consistently. So you definitely get caught up in that as not just a lifestyle, but kind of a rhythm that you live, right?
Yeah, for sure. I can't say I miss it, but I'm glad I did it. Let's put it like that.
I miss the traveling and obviously the freedom of being able to see a different city every day. It was obviously the time to do it is when you're young, and I'm glad I spent early 20s, mid 20s doing it. It was great. So I do look back on it fondly, but the stability now of being home and consistent job and wife, kids, it's nice.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Hey, quick pause. Have you ever felt like your mixes are close, but just not quite to the level that you hear from the pros? The truth is, even with today's powerful home studios, it's the techniques that make all the difference. The Mixing Engineer's Handbook, now in its 6th edition, walks you through these techniques step by step, from EQ and compression to immersive audio and the latest plugins. You'll also hear directly from some of the world's top mixers through exclusive interviews and bonus content. If you want your mixes to sound polished and professional no matter what setup you're working on, scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. Okay, tell me about the recent merger between Downright Music and Overcast Merch.
So Downright Merch and Overcast have come together to form a new company called Armada. And effectively, we have we've been working on it for a while. And now that we're at the point that we can make it official and we can utilize both of our services, Overcast Design and Print previously being really focused on screen printing, embroidery, and decoration, and Downright Merch being really focused on e-commerce and fulfillment. It's really us bringing both of our strong suits together and combining forces to really create a better product and a better service for our clients at the end of the day.
Are they based out of Long Beach?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. When I saw that you have 2 different offices on each coast, I thought, okay.
Yeah, they're in Long Beach and we're in Methuen, Massachusetts. Or our main warehouse is in Methuen, Massachusetts. So we got both coasts covered.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. This is probably a common question. And I bet it changes all the time. But what is the best-selling merch item right now?
I think whenever we have an artist that does a reissue of a vinyl record, especially a fan favorite, maybe it's a record that they put out and it's a 15-year anniversary or a 10-year anniversary, and we see and we get the chance to help them with a vinyl reissue. Those always sell the best. Right. I think that there's obviously a massive resurgence for vinyl over the past 10 years, maybe a little bit longer at this point. But we always see those being the most desirable product. And those are always the type of campaigns that I feel like get the biggest fan reaction when we're able to reissue a fan favorite. And that also goes for new records. There's a lot of new vinyl releases when an artist puts out one of their new albums, and we do the pre-order for it. Those always tend to sell really, really well too.
How about clothing?
You can't go wrong with a black t-shirt. Right? That's really the bread and butter of what we do. So I feel like black t-shirts, or really any t-shirts, and hoodies and long sleeves are the core, the core product offering. But we had the ability to get really creative with products for our clients, even on the apparel side. Like there's a lot of custom made garments that we'll partner with our clients to do the design and the sketch, and really get specific on the type of clothing that we're designing for them. So that's always exciting when we get to work on those sorts of projects.
Okay, that being said, then what would be the sweet spot price point for something like that?
Would you say for the t-shirt, hoodie, or a vinyl? That,
and also for the custom merch that you're just talking about.
I feel like right now, t-shirts that is selling at concerts, it's really $30. I feel like that should be the going rate. Obviously you go to some huge arena shows and you see artists selling shirts for $55, $60. That's a little much. I mean, I feel like 30, 35 is really the sweet spot. And that's jumped up. I feel like when we first started, it was still $20. And that was pretty standard. But given the price of cotton and the price of garments going up so much over the past 4 or 5 years, I feel like we've seen that price kind of push a little bit closer to $35. Maybe for a hoodie, $60. I feel like that's pretty fair as well.
And you just mentioned about custom items that you work with your various clients on, and I'm sure you can get more money on those, but how much more?
Like on the custom apparel that we work with, that we design?
Yeah, they
definitely sell at a premium, and I feel like because the cost of it is significantly more to come up with a t-shirt from scratch. Those obviously have more, they're more costly, but they're not outrageously priced. They're still in line with what a standard black shirt would be.
Yeah. Okay, here's something that I bet every indie musician wants to know. What piece of merch has the highest profit margin?
It really depends on the volume that you're printing, but I feel like, again, black t-shirts, it's a bread and butter. You can't go wrong with it. I feel like especially, and we're always big advocates for making a kind of a consolidated product line of 3 to 5 items most. The last thing we want is for artists to go out and it look like they have a flea market at their merch table. We want to make sure that they have a handful of options. And when artists are able to do that, obviously they're able to print more and really get better cost, right? That some bulk discounts for the items that they are printing. So I think that, t-shirts is definitely the most cost effective item, I feel like, and you can really get the most margin if done right.
Now, I know that you have some high-end artists, but I'm sure you also have many indie artists that are playing the scene, and probably the same scene that you and I grew up in. Now, that being said, there are fewer and fewer venues these days. So how does that impact the merch business?
I think it impacts artists really at large. I think it trickles down. I feel like less places to play, less options. Obviously, a big consolidation to the Live Nation shows where really there are instituted like merch cuts that the artists have to pay. I feel like that's probably more impactful, and that really being the norm is something that the artists, especially independent artists, kind of have to be mindful of. And I wish there were more independent venues. It seems to always be one or two that go out every single year, which is unfortunate, especially since COVID. I feel like that's the trajectory that it's been on. So unfortunately, you're right. There are significantly less options. And that's really not ideal for artists, or the community.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I was surprised at, I read somewhere that one of the reasons why many clubs are going out is because of alcohol consumption being down.
That would make sense, right?
And who would have thought?
Yeah, the kids just aren't drinking anymore.
Yeah. Doesn't make sense to me.
That does make sense. I mean, I feel like when I was growing up going to shows, there was a lot of all age halls. I mean, we would just make our own venue. Like we would play at a skate park or we would play basement shows. So that's always an option, right? And when there's a will, there's a way. I feel like if there's a community or a scene, I feel like there's always a crop of bands that are willing to get kind of creative and figure out their own way to do it.
Yeah. One of the things that sort of surprised me, and I don't know why it should, maybe because I haven't operated on this level before, advances from a merch company to an artist. And I read your article, actually. I saw it in Hypebot. And I thought to myself, gee, I had no concept of that happening, but that's a big deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar mechanics than that as a record label, right? As a record label advance and trying to solidify a deal with an artist for a long-term contract. It's very common in our industry.
Okay, but that's obviously a higher-end artist that's doing that.
Usually, yeah. Usually that's really a way to try to win some bigger business. It's kind of commonplace to have to come in with some sort of advance or something that's attractive for an artist of that size.
Yeah, sure. What's the most unusual merch item that you ever had to create or deliver?
Axes. So we did axes for this artist Ice Nine Kills. We've done hammers for a artist Kubla Khan. So just that's probably the two strangest ones. But I feel like we've done kind of like across the board. I think I always say, like, if you can think it, we could probably brand it and make it into a merch item. So we've done beverage collaborations before. It's like really the sky's the limit.
How easy is it to source stuff like that? Only because you're up against large retailers that are buying in much greater bulk than you probably are in something like that. So is there a long wait time to get delivery on it?
There is. For a lot of the really customized product, there is a longer wait time as opposed to a lot of the cloth items that we produce in-house, where we're able to, in some instances, we're able to produce a day of. But if we're doing highly customized specific products, yeah, sometimes there's a long waiting period, especially over COVID. I mean, that any expectations were out the window. There was some stuff that we were waiting 3, 4, 5 months for delivery, but because it's sourced overseas, there's always a logistics component with trying to figure out timeline and costs for getting it into the States. So it's really kind of a gamble on not a gamble, but it has its own elements every time we explore doing a new type of product.
Has the tariffs affected you at all?
Slightly. The tariff on cotton, that has had an impact on costs for the majority of the product that we're producing. That's really been the most impactful. But luckily it hasn't been detrimental.
Okay. What don't people know about what you do that you wish they did?
I think the logistics side of the business and the amount of tasks and parts that go into the life cycle of creating a piece of merch is really interesting. And I think that it's definitely something that I think should be more well known. I think that seeing the life cycle of how an order comes to be, from the ideation and putting together the graphic design to doing sampling and then putting together mocks, and how it actually runs through the production life cycle, whether it is produced in-house or whether it's being sourced from overseas. There's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of different steps throughout the entire process. And I think that that's something that's not as commonly understood by either artists or by customers. And I think that is an interesting component of our business, and I think it's I think the more knowledge that our artists have in that, the better our working relationship tends to be. So I think that's the most least known facet of what we do.
You should probably do a video of that.
We've thought about it, and we've kind of put some videos together with how an idea becomes a sketch, becomes a piece of merch, right? But I think seeing the process of even how the cotton in the blank t-shirts are sourced and how they're ordered and how they get delivered to our screen printing shop, those are all kind of ancillary things that happen to come together and can create our product. So it's definitely a complex supply chain.
Is there anything proprietary that you wouldn't let out?
No, because I think it's just systems and processes that we've built over the years that suit our business, right? I don't think there's anything inherently proprietary. I think just our team, I think they're throughout the years and their knowledge base has grown, and it's just the way that we operate our business. It's a lot of manpower.
Yeah. What advice would you give to an indie act, let's say, that's looking to get some merch and just doesn't have any experience?
I would say keep it simple. I think that the biggest, I don't want to say downfall, but the biggest risk, especially from a profitability standpoint, would be ordering too many products and ordering too few of too many products. So having 25 units of 17 different products is like, it's not the most cost-effective way to go about it. So back to my point earlier, I always advise our artists to try to keep it simple. Small, condensed product line. And I would say that making sure that the merch represents your artistic brand and your vision, that's crucial, and partnering with a company that can understand that and be able to deliver for that or deliver on that for you is crucial.
See, I would think it would be purchasing too much of an item because of the price break at a certain point.
It gets cheaper the more that you purchase. So
Right.
I feel like especially now with the advent of being able to sell online, which is a service that we provide our artists. Yeah, you never want to get overloaded with inventory, but what's good is that there are multiple options for how artists can sell their merch. They can go out on tour, right? And they can sell it at their shows, and then they have the option to process the leftovers into the store and sell it online. So it's nice to give multiple sales channel options to our artists. That way, even if they do end up in the unfortunate situation where they might have a surplus of inventory, they have options for how they can sell it.
Do you do any print on demand?
We do, yeah, and that's a great option, especially for new designs and new ideas that maybe are not tested yet, and just to be able to gauge fan reaction. I think print on demand is a great tool for that.
Yeah, especially for online. Well, online is the obvious place. It wouldn't work any other way.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen artists use QR codes at their show, right? And they can, fans can scan and check out online, and it gets delivered. Some of that is print on demand. So it's almost like a blend of both, online and tour. It's kind of the functions of them are becoming closer and closer.
Is there one problem that you have in your job that vexes you, that you wish you can get rid of?
There's quite a few every day. Every day is a new problem. And like I said, it's because this is a logistics heavy business. That is really where I spend a lot of my time, is trying to make sure that we're kind of protected at all areas and that there aren't any landmines with our supply chain. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of different tasks and at different points to the product to be ordered and actually delivered to the customer. So that is where a lot of the pain points come, where a simple UPS misdelivery or having the boxes deliver an hour late can really screw things up for a band. So, there's a lot of the details and logistics that take up a lot of my day.
Taking a step back and taking the 10,000 foot view, considering where you're at in the business, you have a unique viewpoint on this. Do you see any trends in the music business that affect what you do?
Yes. I mean, I think that there's definitely a lot of trends in terms of direct to consumer and fan engagement that directly impacts our business. I think the ability to have a custom web store that also doubles as your main website, that also doubles as your fan club and your VIP ticketing hub. I think that the consolidation and everything kind of being artist-centered and not having to lean on third-party channels to be able to sell these things. I think that's a big trend that we're seeing, that we have been seeing really for the past 10 years. And that's really something that I feel like we caught on to early, which is why we've always pushed to have artists selling through their own custom stores that we build them. And we want to make that the central hub for all of their business, right? We love when they sell their VIP tickets through their website and they do custom content and song releases through the website, because that is really a channel that they own, that they can use to best connect directly with their audience. So that's probably the biggest trend that I've been seeing over the past, call it 10 years, that directly impacts our area of the business.
Now, I know you help them with e-commerce, but does that also include putting together a site for them as well? I know there's an e-commerce component there, but would it also include everything else, like you just talked about? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We build the site from beginning to end. We take care of all of the e-commerce design and all of the web store maintenance, and we help them at every step of the way for their e-commerce site build.
Okay, that's very cool.
So we try to make it easy.
That solves a lot of problems, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah. Especially, it used to be so difficult, I feel like, to set up a custom store to sell product through. You have to learn how to, either you had to know how to code or you had to hire someone and pay them some absorbent amount of money to build a custom website. And it's just not the case anymore. It's a lot sleeker, and it's a lot easier to be able to set up a website and a web store now.
Yeah. Last question, Seamus, and thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you.
What's the best piece of advice that maybe you learned along the way, or maybe somebody imparted to you?
I would say consistency, day in and day out, even with the natural flows of business. I feel like remaining consistent and trying to stay dedicated to the company core mission and your overall goals. Though it's hard day in and day out, being able to zoom out and take a 30,000 foot view on what you're trying to achieve requires consistency. So I think that's crucial for any endeavor.
Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news, and find out about openings for my latest online classes at bobbyowsinski.com. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.